Hello, welcome. I'm going to do a little bit of quilting today, and I thought I would show you how I achieve my quilting stitch. I'm working on this quilt. I've shown it before. This is what I'm going to be doing, another little flower like this. And I'm doing what I learned many, many years ago is the traditional quilting stitch. Nowadays, people are quilting in a different manner, without a hoop or a frame, longer stitches, thicker threads. But this is the way that I was taught. I like the look of it. I feel that when I'm quilting, I'm bringing the colors and the pattern of the quilt top out. I'm not I'm not putting an all over design on top of it. My threads kind of fade away, and you can see the puckering effect, but you can't see, it's harder to see the individual little threads. And I just feel like the world has flipped somehow, and the other quilting way is more prominent now. So in case you are unfamiliar with this and would like to see how I do it, I thought I'd show you. So come on with me. I'm going to have an overhead, and I'm going to show you how to do the stitch itself. But first I thought I would show you some supplies. I have this quilt hoop. I've had it for a really, really long time. Um, my mother knew the woodworker, or had access to the woodworker, and her quilt guild ordered lots of them. They all had one. So when she was placing her order, and she knew that I was a quilter, I actually started quilting before she did. Um, she said, "Do you want one?" And I said, "Sure." And I've loved it ever since. I've tried. Back in those early days, we did have a Q-snap, and people know Q-snaps for their cross stitch, but they actually had large ones for quilting. I don't know if they still have them. It just didn't work for me. Um, I didn't like the tension that I was getting, and I just found it. But once I started using this wooden one, I loved it, and I've loved it ever since. Next, I use a stencil. This stencil, 85 cents it says. And if anybody is in the Central Virginia area, this was from Clothesline in Dayton. Now it's Patchwork something. Huge, huge store, lovely. So if you're ever in the Harrisonburg area, perhaps going to the Quilt Museum. This is right down the road. I believe it's Route 42. I'll put corrections, if I'm wrong, but excellent, excellent store. Tons of fabric, tons of stencils, everything you would need. If you're visiting the area, it's a must stop. This is a stencil. And what I do is I use this, this says Fine Point Mark Be Gone, but any kind of a marking pen. This is a water soluble. You can also use a disappearing. And basically you place it where you want it, and just, fill in these, so that this leaves a mark. You'll see that it's not connected. You can connect all these once it's on your quilt if you want to. You can fill in, so that it's one connecting line. And a lot of these stencils, they make it so that it's effortless stitching. You can just go around and around and around and around. This one is not quite as effortless, but I think it's pretty. And then what I use, this is probably frowned on, but well, no, this is cotton. This is quilting thread, and it's called Americana. I think I got this at Joann's. 100% glazed cotton. This is what I use. And a thimble. Now you'll notice this thimble, it's got a ridge at the top. Let's see if I'm getting that well. There's a ridge at the top and lots of little pokey thingies so that what you want is you want your needle to get caught in those so that you can push it, and it doesn't slide. So if you've got a lovely porcelain thimble, with decorative flowers, that's not what we need. We need a heavy duty. I use this one. There are some quilters that swear by leather thimbles. I don't like to use leather at all, so I stick with that one. I've had it for years and years. Another one that I have, this was my mother's, and it's, instead of going down, it's got this thing that's raised up. This one's a little bit too big for me, but what I do is I have this one on my right middle finger, and oftentimes if I'm in the quilt, so to speak, and I need help pushing the needle from underneath, I'll stick this one on for a minute just to give me, another pushing mechanism. So that's it. Pretty basic. Pretty basic. I've got my hoop. I've got my stencil and my marking pen, which if you're doing a 1/4 inch away from a seam or in the ditch or something along those lines, you don't even need a stencil. Yeah, and just a basic, this is pretty much all I use. This is white. You can't get more basic than that. I like to use white. And even on darker quilts, I still use white. Call me a traditionalist. But yeah, I don't like to change the colors. It's not about the threads and the stitch. It's about the puckering of it, I guess. So join me on the overhead and I'll show you how to do this. It's called a rocking motion. It's an old-fashioned quilt stitch. Okay, so to begin with, I've got the quilt in the hoop and I have gone underneath. This is about how much springiness you want. Hopefully that's showing. And when I put on my template, you'll see I have these little pieces of washi tape and I'm working on the very edge. This is one of the setting triangles. This is the border. I put it approximately where I want it, and then I line up the little pieces of washi tape with the seam of the border. I said last time I was going to do just 3 petals and sort of alternate them. I didn't like that look. So what I've decided to do is just do the entire flower so that it's on the corner, the setting triangle, and extending into the border. And so far I like it. So it's like a continuity of the pattern. And because this is a simple quilt, I thought simplicity is best. So I'm just going through those, hopefully you can see that, and I can see that I've missed one in the middle. It's easier to check this. And I do everything pretty much sitting down on a large chair or a sofa. It's just easier. And now I'm standing up doing this for the camera. But it's, once you mark, you can check it all and make sure that your that the hoop is knocking into where my camera is. So if I move it, that's why. But we've got this nice marking that we can see. It's not so thick that, we can never get it out. It comes out quite easily. And what I do is I just go over it with a damp towel. And if there are little bits that remain, I get those out on a second go around or when I wash it. But what I did was I stuck my hand underneath and I felt, just to make sure I don't have anything that's hooped in, causing a crease, or, just make sure everything is smooth under there. And firstly, you want to get a knot. I do I do 2 knots, one on top of the other. There is a quilting knot that you can do. I have never in my life been able to do it. I don't know why. But start a little ways away. And what I'm doing is just going through the uppermost fabric and I'm kind of snaking it along in the batting. And then come out where you want your first stitch to start. What I want to do is I want to kind of pop that knot through. I was talking. Hopefully you heard the pop. And you tug it a little bit. Tug it a little bit, you know, just to make sure that it's caught in there. If it pulls right out, do it again because that's not going to be very secure. But if you give it a good tug and it stays in there, you're good to go. My left hand is underneath the quilt. And what I'm doing, I've got my middle finger and I'm going to put my needle straight down as close to this first stitch as I can. Now, you don't want to go too close because all of these stitches need to be even. That's the hardest thing is figuring out your stitch length. You want them all to be even. So if you are doing a longer stitch, that's fine. Just make sure that they're all even. But theoretically, you want it as close as you can get it. I have felt the needle with my left middle finger and I have pushed it back up to the surface. Just a teeny tiny bit. That's all that shows is just a teeny tiny bit. And then I rock the needle. It came out. That's okay. I rock the needle back down so that I'm going straight down. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going straight down. So when you're on the wrong side, it's much harder to be straight up and down. You can see my needle is bending. You don't want to let your needle bend too much because it will break. So you just continue this kind of rocking back and forth, just taking tiny, tiny little bites. Not too many because, again, your needle will bend. And now I'm using my left index finger to push the needle to the surface. And there you go. Not very even. Now I'll use this as an example. This stitch is far longer than I would like it. These stitches are okay, but this stitch is too long and there's too much of a gap in between. So you know what I'm going to do? I am going to take the eye end of my needle and I'm going to take all, whoops, sorry, I hit the camera. I'm going to take all these out because I don't like them. And if there's something that you've quilted that you don't like, that you're not happy with, get rid of it right away. Now, don't be too much of a perfectionist. Right now I'm threading my needle again. That's why I'm out of the shot. I can't thread this tiny little eye from far away. So please bear with me. But you don't want to be, again, this is finding that sweet spot. You don't want to be too much of a perfectionist where you're ripping out every single stitch. But you also, because this is frayed a little bit, this end, I'm cutting just a tiny bit off to make it easier to thread. You don't want to take out too many of your efforts because this is what will happen. Repeated threading of the needle will make it very, very hard. So I'm going to lean over very close so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to use a little bit more care. And the first couple of stitches I find are the hardest. The rocking motion stitches that you get are pretty straightforward, but it's that first stitch getting it right. Now, do you see the difference? Hopefully you can see. I know it's white thread on white fabric with, you know, not a very good videographer and, you know, an older camera, but we do our best. So again, go as close to that stitch as you can. And the first time I do this, I kind of err on being too close because as you saw on my first effort, your first stitch is gonna be longer than you think it's going to be. And what's happening on the other side is I'm feeling that needle every time it goes down just to ensure that it's gone through all the layers. And there are times when you actually start sewing your finger. So be careful at first because your finger is going to get very, very sore. So if you poke your finger too hard at first, you're not going to be able to quilt as long. So be mindful of that. And there are also things, if you go to a very large quilt store or maybe online, I haven't bought these in years, but they're little pads that you can stick on fingers. I often put one on my left middle finger, my underneath hand. And see, I'm scooching the frame. Instead of adjusting my hand for the curves, I adjust the frame. And that's what I like about this. But these little pads, they're like little tiny Band-Aids, but they're not big. They're just tip of the finger size. They're oval and clear, and I was given a package years and years ago by my mother-in-law, and I've loved them. They last a pretty long time if you are using one for a day or a weekend. You know, don't take it off every time you stop quilting and throw it away, you know, or every time you wash your hands. Just gently remove it. It's sort of, you know, sticky like a Post-it note where you can re-stick it, but each time it gets less sticky. And let's see if you can see all this. Yeah, so I'm very careful of mine, so I can make it last for days and days and days of quilting, which is why a package has lasted me all these years. But are you seeing how this is done? Just very close to your exit point. Do the best you can with a rocking motion. It's easier going down, obviously, than coming back up. Use both hands. I'm pushing with my right middle finger using my thimble. I'm letting the thimble do the work. And just follow the lines along the curves. Now, one thing I also want to show you, this is a quick tutorial, when you need to go somewhere else. Say I'm done with this flower and there's no good place, you know, to go. Everything has been quilted in this area and I need to jump somewhere else. What you do is you take a little tiny bite in just the top layer, and then you move your needle underneath just the top layer until you can poke it out where you want it to go. And you can do this in increments too. You don't need to do it all in one fell swoop. If you're not all the way there, see, I'm not all the way there, pull your thread back a little bit so that it makes the hole bigger. Go in that little hole just through the first layer of fabric, and then come out where you ultimately want to go, and you know, kind of do this motion with your needle, and it will get rid of all of the, so the thread is tucked in between the layers. It's in the batting somewhere. It's not going to show from the wrong side. You've moved effortlessly to the other side without having to tie off a knot. And let me show you the knot. What I do when I'm done is I tie one knot just about there, maybe a little farther away, and then I tie my second knot. And what you want to do is, gosh, I'm in my own shadow. You want to go again where there's a hole, where you've come out, and kind of, you know, do this kind of motion so that it gets caught in the batting, and then pop it through. And that way, see, what I did was I moved from here over to here, and then I tied a knot. You can't see that I was ever there at all. And then if you've got a long piece of thread, go ahead and do another knot. I'm calling this a double knot. I'm not sure if that's its correct name. It's two knots, one on top of another. Do that knot. Pull this up just ever so slightly and snip it off, and then the excess will go right back in the batting. See, I was never there. You've got you're not all ready for the next time you start sewing, and you've made some progress. What do you think? Can you see where I've traveled along that line? Hopefully you can see. I'm going to keep going up here. When you hit the top, come out on top. I shouldn't say the top, I should say, you know, the end of this curve. Come out on top so that you're ready to move the hoop and go down again and continue on. When I get to here, sometimes I snake it through so that I start down here again, and sometimes I just keep going, and then I'll fill in that other little part at the end. Every stencil is different. Sometimes you're interrupted and you've started, you've forgotten where your path is, and when you pick it up the next time, it could be days later, it could be weeks later. You know, you just start in a different place, and that's fine too. But that's the way that I was taught to quilt. I'll take this hoop off. You want it tight, but you want some give. And I'll show you, whoops, sorry about that. Show you what we've done on the other side. This is what I mean about always using the white thread. Remember, your wrong side is going to show. And it's not perfect, but it's going to be laundered many, many times. It's going to do that nice puckering. You're probably never going to see these stitches as clearly again. And if you do not want to see your stitches on the reverse side, just use a lighter fabric. So that's it. That's my tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. Whatever kind of quilting method you use is fine. The purpose of quilting is to hold 3 layers together: the backing fabric, the batting, and the quilt top. That's its sole purpose, is just to hold them together. People have been tying quilts for generations, quilting using a variety of stitch lengths and methods. It's all fine. Whatever you end up with is going to be your own masterpiece, and it's going to be beloved for generations. Happy quilting, and I'll see you here again soon.